Has Oscar Piastri signed for McLaren? So unless you've been living under a rock for the past few days, you'll know F1 silly season has begun, and the main talking points are to do with Oscar Piastri. Now, it looks like he is joining McLaren. That's what all the news articles are saying today, and yeah, I think that is clear what's going to happen, but it hasn't been confirmed by either McLaren, Alpine or Oscar Piastri himself. So we're going to look at this in a bit more detail and all the other news, and maybe some of the other teams he could potentially still be joining. I still think there's a case for teams like AlphaTauri, Williams, and maybe even Alpine if he hasn't read the contract correct, and he still is contracted to Alpine as they haven't taken that tweet down. So this video is going to go through everything, so stick around to the end. So I'm going to give you a really brief recap of what has happened. Now, on the 28th of July, Sebastian Vettel started an Instagram page and he suddenly announced that he was going to retire at the end of the 2022 season. Now, I think this was a surprise to everyone, but suddenly after that, a few days after, out of the blue, Aston Martin announced that Fernando Alonso was going to join them for 2023. And he's signed a multi-year contract, so he's going to be there for at least 2 years. Now, this clearly shocked Alpine. They weren't expecting him to do this, and they'd obviously been in talks with Aston Martin behind their back. So this is where things started to turn pretty sour. So the day after, Alpine put out a statement saying our 2023 driver lineup is confirmed: Esteban Ocon and Oscar Piastri. Now, I think the whole of F1 Twitter and all the fans thought this was really great news for Oscar Piastri and they were over the moon, but there were a few comments and concerns that there were no quotes from Oscar himself. He hadn't put out a statement to say thank you, and in this statement it did say promoted to race with Ocon from the start of the 2023 season. It had nothing to do with signing a contract. Now, a few hours after that statement from Alpine, Oscar Piastri put out a statement himself saying, "I understand that without my agreement, Alpine have put out a press release late this afternoon that I am driving for them next year. This is wrong and I have not signed a contract with Alpine for 2023. I will not be driving for Alpine next year." Now, there's two things with this. Firstly, he clearly didn't know that Alpine were going to put out the statement. And secondly, at the end of this statement, he put, "I will not be driving for Alpine next year." I think this is a very strong message that I don't think he's saying this because he's unhappy they put out a statement. I think he'd be over the moon to get promoted, but he clearly has a contract signed with another team in Formula 1. And in my opinion, it has to be a team better than Alpine are currently. So the only teams that he could potentially sign for, in my opinion, are Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, or McLaren. Now, Red Bull, I don't think the drivers are going anywhere. Same for Ferrari and Mercedes, to be honest. I can't see him getting to any of those teams. Potentially Mercedes if Hamilton retires, but it's not looking likely at the moment. So the only team that makes sense is McLaren. There's one more team there with AlphaTauri that I'll get into a little bit later, but I don't think that is going to be as an obvious decision as McLaren looks at the moment. So what's the current news and why does it look like Oscar is so set on McLaren when neither him or them have actually put out any statements? Now, it has been reported from motorsport.com that McLaren have communicated to Daniel Ricciardo that they intend to replace him with Oscar Piastri in F1 next season. Now, we know Daniel Ricciardo is contracted to 2023. We don't know the ins and outs of the contract, but we know that if Daniel wants to stick this contract out, he can, but there may be a potential for McLaren to buy out this contract. I don't think McLaren would be stupid enough to sign a deal with Oscar without having an option in Daniel's contract to buy it out. The other news is coming out is that Oscar Piastri's McLaren contract has reportedly been validated by the FIA's contract negotiation board. So clearly someone from the FIA has leaked this information, or it still could potentially be a rumour. The sources on this aren't the best. But this is saying it would allow Piastri to drive for McLaren in 2023 if they were to get rid of Daniel Ricciardo, and this looks like the most possible option so far. The current news is saying that Piastri is going to join McLaren, but things can change, and these are all just rumours at the moment. No one was expecting Sebastian Vettel to retire last week. Fernando Alonso, no one was expecting him to go to Aston Martin on a multi-year contract, so things can change very quickly. So let's have a look at the other options that Piastri could potentially do in Formula 1. So looking at the 2023 driver lineup, Alonso is now contracted to Aston Martin, so he won't be going anywhere and their driver lineup's fixed. Yuki Tsunoda is contracted to the end of this season, so it's probably unlikely that he will join their team, but we'll get into that a little bit later. I think Zhou, he is still contracted to the end of this season, but he's a rookie, so they probably were a bit hesitant on signing him on a long-term contract. He obviously brings in a lot of money, being from China. Williams potentially didn't have any driver lineups. Albon has just signed a new contract, but Latifi hasn't, and that is another driver we'll get into slightly later. Mick Schumacher's contract is up at the end of the season, he could potentially replace him, and Daniel Ricciardo is the main option that we think Piastri is going to replace currently. Now, one of the teams I want to consider are Williams. They actually came out last year saying they no longer need paid drivers, and we know Latifi is a paid driver and his contract is up at the end of this season. Now, what you're thinking is probably, why would he reject a team like Alpine to go for a team that are fighting at the bottom of the championship like Williams? Now, it's clear that Piastri had this contract signed before Alonso decided to leave to go to Aston Martin. So a reason I think he could have potentially done this was he knew Alonso was going to be at Alpine for the 2023 season at least, and he might have thought, you know what, I'm not actually going to be able to get a chance to race in Formula 1 for maybe 1, 2 or 3 more years, and he's already had a year out of motorsport. Now, I think he could have gone to Williams, agreed to race with them for the 2023 season, and then potentially go from there. This is a theory, but I think it is probably quite unlikely that he would burn his bridges with Alpine to go to a team like Williams for just maybe 1 or 2 years. I think it's unlikely Alpine would take him back, and I think he probably would have asked Alpine if this was okay, and I think they would have been aware of the situation, which they clearly aren't. Another team I think is worth considering is AlphaTauri. Now, Gasly has just been contracted until 2023, but Tsunoda's contract ends at the end of this season. Now, Helmut Marko, who's the head of the Red Bull Junior Drivers Program, has come out and said we can presumably assume that the current drivers, meaning Gasly and Tsunoda, will remain in their places for the 2023 season. Now, while I do believe this is true, it's also worth considering. Max Verstappen is clearly a long-term driver for Red Bull. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. Now, Perez is contracted to 2024. I think they are extremely happy with Perez, but they don't have any drivers really pushing through this Red Bull program, looking to join the Red Bull team, which I think they could be quite concerned about. I don't think they would take Gasly back at Red Bull, and I don't think they would be happy to take Tsunoda this year or even next year, to be honest. Now, could they give up Tsunoda with him going to somewhere like Alpine, and Piastri get a year in the Red Bull Junior program at AlphaTauri before joining Red Bull potentially in 2025 after Perez leaves? Potentially, I think this could be an option, and it does make sense from Piastri's point of view to reject Alpine, as a contract with Red Bull is much more favourable. Like the Williams scenario, I don't know if Piastri would have gone behind Alpine's back, but I think this is more believable to go behind Alpine's back for a team like Red Bull, who you know if you can get into that seat, you're going to have a car that can win races and he could potentially win championships. Now, the final option that I don't think many people are talking about is, what if Alpine are correct and Piastri is not? Now, the teams obviously have lawyers, they go through the contracts, they'll have PR people. So Alpine believed that they were in the right, as they haven't taken this tweet down still, even I think it's 3 days now since they put this out. So it could be correct that Piastri is actually contracted to Alpine, and there was a clause in his contract that if one of their drivers left, he would have to fill the obligations of that contract. Now, Piastri himself would have lawyers that would read through his contract, and he obviously put out that very bold statement, so he doesn't think that's true, but we just don't know at this current stage. Now, would Alpine take him back? I don't know. I think it'd be very awkward, but it is something that's worth considering that I don't think many people have considered. So where is Oscar Piastri going to go next year? Let me know down in the comments your thoughts and opinions, and I'll keep you updated with any news, and we'll see how the silly season of F1 develops. Now, if you could subscribe to the channel, I'd really appreciate that, and it really helps the channel to grow. Also, if you want, you can follow me on Twitter. My name is Dan with 2 underscores OTG, and I also have a TikTok account, Off the Grid F1, so you can give me a follow over there, where I post a bit more short form content. So thanks for watching to the end, give me a follow, and I'll see you all soon. Cheers.